Hello, in this video we're going to go over the different types of values that you can find and use in Python. Some of the terms we're going to go over are value, literal, data type, integer, float, and conversion. Now, understanding values may be the most important thing that you learn as an early Python programmer, because you can't do any programming unless you use the right values, and very, very often you have to convert or change a value from one type to another. So we're going to discuss the different types of values that there are, and then also how to convert one value from another, and we'll also write a little bit of code at the end of this presentation. So simply put, a value is just a single piece of data that can be stored in a variable. That's basically what a value is. And you'll hear the term value very often, and you'll use that term. So instead of saying what was the word or what was the number, you will say what is the value in the input box, or what is the value entered for the age of the person, or whatever. So we're going to talk about value very often, and that'll be in place of saying what you otherwise would normally say in a regular conversation. Now, the first thing we're going to learn is the term literal. Literal is kind of like it sounds. It's literally what is actually typed in, or what is within the quotes. So it's a value that is not in a variable. And very often we use variables with our values. We might say, input equals, and then input hello world, or name equals Sarah. Those would not be literals. But sometimes we actually have actual words or string typed into the program, and that would be considered a literal, because it doesn't ever change. It is what it is all of the time. Now, data type is a very important concept to understand, because this describes the category of a value. And generally speaking, there are a few more, but most of the stuff we do would involve three different types of data: strings, integers, and floats. Now, a string is anything in quotes. So hello world is a string, the word Sarah is a string, 160, because it's in quotes, is a string. And strings cannot be computed. You can't add a string to another, like this 160 plus another 160 that looks like this would not equal 320. It would be literally what it is. It would be a string. So strings are important because only strings can be printed. We can't print anything except for strings. And that will get into the last little part that we learn about of why it's important to learn how to convert our data type from one to the other. But strings, anything in a quote. An integer is a whole number. So any number that does not have a decimal and is not in a quote. So 160 is an integer here. It's not an integer here because it's in quotes. But without quotes, it's an integer. Minus 3,829, even 0. Those are all integers, and these can be computed, but they can't be printed. Then we have what's called a float, and a float is any number with a decimal in it. So 1.60 minus 38.29, 0.098, those are all floats. And this is important because when we handle numbers and computations in Python and in other languages, it's really important that we discern, are we talking about whole numbers or are we talking about floats? So you have to know which one you need to use, or which one you are using, or which one you have to convert something else into. Sometimes you're going to convert an integer into a float so that you can do something with it, do some sort of a computation. Now, luckily, because these types are all different, we can convert one type to another, and we do that all the time. So the way this is written, the syntax is we do the type, and the type is the type of value you want your value to become. So it's not what it is, it's what you want to make it into. And then within parentheses, the argument right here would be the value. So the value you are actually converting. So for example, if we want to print a number, for example, an integer, we have to convert it into a string. So we just do str, and then in parentheses, we do the value, whatever that is. So an example would be value would be the variable name, value equals str, and then in parentheses 52. This would change this 52 into a string, and it would let us print it. Now, once we've done that, we can't use it to compute, but luckily we could turn it back into an integer if we want to. And we do that by doing int and then value. So this right here, this value becomes an integer. So the example is value equals int and then in parentheses, quote 52. So we take the string 52 and we make it into an integer. Then we can do some computations. And then we have right here float value, and value equals float, and then 52. We would turn this string into a float, which would basically be 52.0. We could also, though it's not on here, we could also do float and then just the number, the integer 52, and that also would be 52.0. Now it is important and probably pretty obvious that you cannot change a string that's a name or something. Like you can't make like Sarah into an integer or a float. Obviously you can't do Sarah plus Sarah. So there are some limitations to how we convert our different types, but those are pretty obvious because you would never try to make Sarah into a number anyways. So let's look at a little bit of code to see how this actually works, and then you'll be done with this video. Now looking in TechSmart, we start off with line 6 says days equals input, how many days are in this month, and print, we're going to print this or show it on the console. This month has, in quotes, plus days, which is a variable name, plus days, that's the string, and this is a concatenation, of course. So what we're hoping to see is that, let's see, it's October, so there's 31 days. This month has 31 days. So if I were to run this program, how many days are in this month? Down here below what you can see, I'm going to type in 31 and hit enter, and it says this month has 31 days. Now you may be thinking, didn't you just say that you can't print an integer? And that's true, you cannot print an integer, and reality is we did not print an integer. Even though I typed in 31, what happens with Python is that any value that is entered into an input is automatically created as a string. So even though I typed in my head a number, 31, that becomes, it automatically becomes or is converted to or changed to a string. And that's the way that it can be printed. So days is a variable that seems like it's going to be a number, but it's not. It's actually a string. Now we can illustrate this point here by simply trying to do a computation using days, which is a number in my head, and we're going to try to, let's do the weeks. So on line 9, type in weeks equals days divided by 7, like that. And then we can go ahead and run this program, and it should, in your head, it should give you, a little bit more than 4. So let's go ahead and run the program. How many days are in this month? I'm going to type in 31, hit enter, and it says, no, trace back. Last call, unsupported operand type, and it says for string and int. So basically what it's doing is int is the 7, that's an integer, but this is a string. Days is a string, so it's not able to do the computation. So that's how you can kind of prove that anything in an input box, regardless of what you put in, is an integer. Now to fix this, we simply have to just convert days into an integer. So we're going to go week equals int, and then in parentheses, I'm going to do days. Now I'm not going to do the entire thing in parentheses, just days, because I'm changing days, which is an integer, or which is a string, into an integer, and then it could do the division problem. So now when I run this, how many days are in this month? 31, and oops, I didn't hit print, so let's print that. All right, so on line 10, just below what we just typed, type in this, print, and then in quotes, that's, then a space, then a quote, then a plus, and then a week, and then plus, and then a quote, space, weeks. So now it should print that's, and then it should be like 4 or whatever weeks. So let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. How many days are in this month? And I'm going to click 31. And oh no, we got another error. And the reason why is because we did not reconvert the number. Because remember, you cannot print an integer. And so we changed the string, which was a string when we input it into an integer to do a computation, but now we have a float. So now we have to change that into a string to do the print. So all we have to do to get that fixed is to go back here and then we're going to make week, str, and we'll go like this. So we're going to make this into a string, and then it should work out. So let's check it out. So let's go ahead and run this. How many days are in the month? 31. Enter. There we go. That's 4.4 and all this stuff. Weeks. So this is actually a string, but it really looks like a float. So that is your lesson. Now, if you got this answer and all of this looks good, then make sure you turn this in.